78 men with kitchen knives. That is the entire army. On the night this story begins, in 73 BC. 2 years later, the same army is 70,000 strong, and it has beaten 9 Roman commanders in a row, including both consuls of Rome in the same season, something no foreign king ever managed. And the man who built it is not a general. He is an escaped gladiator, a slave the Romans bought by weight. Rome will need its 2 richest and most ruthless men and 8 legions to stop him. This is the story of Spartacus, and of the one problem that 70,000 followers and an unbeaten record could not solve. Spartacus was not born a slave. He was a Thracian from the mountains south of the Danube, and the sources say he served with the Roman army as an auxiliary soldier before he deserted, was caught, and was sold. That detail is the key to everything that follows. Rome trained him, then Rome priced him. A word first, because the whole story stands on it. Roman Italy ran on slaves. Perhaps 1 person in 3 in some regions was property. A slave could be a mine worker, a tutor, an accountant, a gladiator. What a slave could not be, ever, was a person with somewhere to go. There was no border to cross, no free state to reach, no legal exit. Escape did not make you free, it made you hunted. Keep that in mind through every victory that follows, because Spartacus understood it earlier than anyone marching behind him. In 73 BC, at a gladiator school in Capua, about 200 slaves planned a breakout. The plot leaked. 78 of them went anyway. That number matters, because it means they chose to run with the plan already blown. They fought their way out of the barracks with skewers and kitchen knives, and on the road they got lucky. They ambushed wagons carrying gladiator weapons to another city. Then they did the only sensible thing a band of armed fugitives could do. They climbed Vesuvius, quiet in those years, a green mountain covered in vines, had one narrow path to the top. The Romans sent 3,000 militia under a commander named Glaber, who camped at the bottom of that single path and decided he could simply starve them out. Why fight men who have nowhere to go? What happened next is the moment Rome should have understood the man it was dealing with. The summit of Vesuvius was covered in wild vines. Spartacus had his men cut them, braid them into ladders, and go down the far side of the mountain, the sheer side, the side no one guards because no one can climb it. The fugitives came down behind Glaber's camp at night and destroyed it. 3,000 militia, beaten by fewer than 100 men who attacked from a direction that did not exist. Notice the shape of the move, because he will repeat it for 2 years. Never meet Rome where Rome is looking. After Vesuvius, the trickle became a flood. Field slaves, herdsmen, the poor free farmers of the south, they came down out of the hills to him. By winter he commanded tens of thousands, and he spent that winter doing something rebels almost never do, drilling them, forging weapons, turning a mob into an army. 72 BC is the year that made him immortal. Rome, finally taking the revolt seriously, sent both consuls, the 2 elected heads of state, each with an army. The rebels had split. Crixus, one of Spartacus's captains, had taken 20 or 30,000 men off on his own, and a consular army caught and killed him at Mount Garganus. And then Spartacus beat one consul, turned, and beat the other, and later that year beat them again when they combined, and beat the governor of Cisalpine Gaul at Mutina for good measure. Ancient sources say he made 300 captured Romans fight as gladiators at the funeral games he held for Crixus, the enslaved forcing the enslavers to play the slave's part. Rome's message system had no category for this. Consuls lost to kings sometimes. They did not lose to property. In the capital, the year's elections for military command went unfilled at first. Nobody wanted the job. And here is the mystery at the center of the story. After Mutina, the road north was open. The Alps were right there. Beyond them lay Gaul and Thrace, home for thousands of his followers and for him. Plutarch says that was the plan: reach the mountains, cross, scatter, be free. The army reached the doorstep of that plan, undefeated. And then it turned around and walked back into Italy. The sources argue about why. Maybe the men refused. An army of Italian-born slaves has no home across the Alps to walk to. Maybe plunder was too good. Maybe crossing wild mountains with 70,000 people, wagons and families was a fantasy all along. But look at it with Spartacus's eyes, the eyes of a man who knew Roman slavery from the inside. Victory kept the army alive, but victory could not produce the one thing the army actually needed: a place where Rome would agree to leave them alone. No such place existed. The Alps were a door to nowhere in particular, and every man in that column knew how Rome treated runaways it caught alone. The man who finally took the job nobody wanted was Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, a man who had built part of that fortune buying burning houses at fire sale prices while his private brigade stood ready to put the fire out. Crassus understood systems, not heroics. He raised and partly paid for 8 legions. When 2 of his legions disobeyed orders and lost a battle, he revived a punishment so old it frightened Romans more than the enemy: decimation, 1 soldier in 10, chosen by lot, beaten to death by the other 9. His army learned to fear him more than Spartacus, which was precisely the point. Then he did the least glorious, most effective thing imaginable. When Spartacus withdrew to the toe of Italy, hoping pirate ships would ferry his people to Sicily, ships that took his payment and never came, Crassus did not attack. He dug a ditch and wall, sea to sea across the peninsula, some 50 kilometers, penning 70,000 people into a winter with no food. He would not fight the unbeaten general. He would starve the quartermaster. On a night of snow and storm, Spartacus filled a stretch of the ditch with earth, branches, and the bodies of dead animals, and broke a third of his army out of the trap. But the end was arithmetic now. Rome had recalled Pompey from Spain with another army, and Lucullus was landing at Brundisium with a third. The rebel force split again. Rome's generals destroyed the splinter of Gannicus and Castus at Cantena. In the spring of 71 BC, by the Sila River, Spartacus turned his remaining men for the last battle. Before it, the sources give him one final gesture. They brought him his horse, and he killed it in front of the army. "If we win," he said, "we will have plenty of horses. If we lose, I will not need one." Then he tried to do the one thing that could still change the shape of the day. He cut through the line toward Crassus himself, killed 2 centurions on the way, and went down fighting, so deep in the press that his body was never found. 6,000 survivors were crucified along the Appian Way, 1 cross every 40 meters or so, from Capua to the gates of Rome. 180 kilometers of Rome's answer to the question the dead man had asked it. So what did Spartacus know? Last time, Musashi, the man who needed no one, whose freedom built nothing that outlived him. Spartacus is the exact mirror. He had the opposite gift. 70,000 people were willing to starve, march, and die behind him. He beat the greatest military machine on earth 9 times, with an army of the machine's own discarded parts. And none of it was enough, because winning was never his actual problem. His problem was that the world had no address where his people could stand still. Every victory bought time, no victory bought a destination. That is the cold insight at the center of his story, and it did not die with him. A movement can be unbeatable in the field and still lose if there is nowhere for it to arrive. Build the destination first, or all the winning in the world just extends the road. Rome crucified 6,000 men to bury that question. 2,000 years later, every underdog who refuses an owner still marches under his name, which is its own kind of a rival, 17 centuries of wages after the fact. Next time, a man who almost never finished anything he started and became the most famous mind in human history precisely because of how he looked at the world. Leonardo da Vinci. Subscribe and step into the minds that made history.